I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of narrative cubism and that kind of melding of those two ideas. Cubism, from the tradition, actually came from the Impressionists and the late 1800s into the 1900s, and morphed into this idea of cubism with Picasso and Duchamp and Braque as the main kind of individuals. There were others, but the idea was this disintegration of your subject matter and then a reintegration of it creatively. And there's this moment of time that I find in between that disintegration and the reintegration where some magical things can happen. And as a very spiritual person, I believe that the divine can actually enter into the work at that point, and that's also where story can become a part of the piece. And so it was a few years ago. I was with my mentor in my studio. He said, "Christopher, I really think you should start sculpting. Like, why aren't you sculpting?" And when you hear that from this amazing artist, you're like, "Oh, okay, I'm listening." Like, okay, what does this look like? I don't know. But it wasn't much of a stretch to start thinking about how these shapes actually do press into space and recede into space. And so the bison was one of the first pieces that I started with. It's called Steadfast. And animals, the series Animalia, it was a bit of low hanging fruit in the sense that animals have so many interesting shapes that I had to work with. The ears, the gills in the trout, the mountain lion with the whiskers created this really interesting problem. How do I make this dimensional but not break off, when someone walks by it, and so how does that shape render? And um, so that was a fun process to try to work through. But also thematically, I've often told my kids, be less beast, more human. Don't just follow every whim, but what are you wanting to grow in your life? What virtues are you trying to cultivate? And so I'm taking that idea and kind of flipping it around and saying, be more beast, less, human. Um, whatever that means. So um, yeah, so each piece, there's a different virtue that I'm meditating on. A bison was the piece that I lived with the longest. So from last September, September of 2023, I started working on this idea, and it's created on gator board, which is this really lovely substrate that has a laminate with a foam in between and another sheet of laminate. And with an X-Acto knife, you can cut it through it very easily if you are patient, and can kind of draw the pieces out. And then as I separated that out, I used cold pressed Bristol board to kind of wrap around and fill in the gaps. Um, and that's different. The horse here, Courage, was actually a piece I did first. That was the first kind of exploration into this idea of dimensional relief paintings. And it was done on what's called 3/4 inch gator board. So it's actually quite a bit of foam that I had to figure out. So it's epoxy clay that kind of filled in the edges there and those gaps. Um, and so as soon as bison came along, I knew I wanted to go deeper. I wanted that really deep, extreme relief. And so the paper was kind of the natural progression into that space. So that was about what I wanted to share from my perspective. I'm really curious. Yeah, the images sourced from a lot of different things. Imaginatively, I've had some kind of interaction with every animal here. So they're all Rocky Mountain animals. From the trout behind my son Isaiah, it's called Ambition. That was a trout that we caught. Actually, Aubrey and I caught in Crested Butte, that had kind of this traumatic experience where it had been caught so many times that its jaw actually broke when it come out of the water. And so it's kind of my mental processing of that, like the lament of the misuse of nature in that way. That we catch and release is a great thing in that we extend the life, but at some point it goes too far. Um, so that's kind of the personal journey, and then the subject matter comes from Pinterest, might come from just the internet. I'm a graphic designer by trade, so Getty Images is often where I venture. Okay, I just need, what does this ear look like, and trying to source it from multiple different things. I'm not a great photographer like some of us in the room, and so
That's why I have 10,000 pictures.
so that was, you know, wherever you can kind of gain information and gain resources, I try to do that. It's a temptation to find one reference and be like, okay, all right, I'm just going to focus here, but it breaks rules, right? You start going into that copyright territory where you need to be really honor other people's work. I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to think of them as studies,
Yeah,
like kind of
no,
understanding
absolutely.
what are these shapes, what's speaking to me, and trying to start as close to a tight drawing as possible, right? So that you're honoring the shapes that are actually there, and then letting that process kind of unfold and fragment, in your imagination as things are trying to be understood. I like to say that I don't see very well. Like some people can just sit down and just draw, and it's like a really tight drawing first go. I am not that person. It really takes me about 3 times to really get a good reference, a good drawing that I can then move on. That was really the case with Bison, with Steadfast. Um, it needed. There's some really interesting, especially that hump. Um, and yeah, I think to your point, there were several bisons I looked at from different angles, and it was really compelling how one hoof was, or that hump. Um, fun fact, that hump is not actually like a camel hump. It's a muscle, and that muscle is connected to its legs. And that's how a bison can run for hours and hours and hours at like 30 miles an hour. Um, so it's incredibly powerful beast. And if you've ever seen like the tourists at Yellowstone get thrown, that's that muscle like contracting. No wonder. Yeah, yeah. But I think that's true. There's multiple references provide different angles and different shapes and different ideas that then translate into dimension.
You want to origami? Like,
I
really,
am drawn to
it
origami.
reminds me of
Yes.
origami.
Thank
Just
you. Especially
yeah.
strength. Like when the background happened, that was like a wonderful gift. Like I stood back from that painting and I said, "Oh my goodness, so it looks like paper that's been folded." Um, Not intentional. That was kind of one of those times where you're holding the brush, but something magical is happening. So uh, I study with Thomas Blackshear. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's my mentor. He does something. He's known for illustration, and so I studied with him for 12 weeks, and all we did was draw faces, and it broke down this kind of psychological um, construct that I think we all have. Who we see, right? We're remembering every face and all the feelings and all the psychology of our humanity, right? Versus what we're physically seeing. What's the light bouncing off of these surfaces? And so it was from Thomas that I really learned how to do breaking down these structures, right, of our face, and that understanding really has carried through the body of my work. I've always been drawn to nature and kind of natural subject matter, the human form, um, animals. I would say that, um, referencing Picasso, Duchamp, Braque, the Impressionists, I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. I think they're amazing composition structure artists. I have a hard time with how so many of their pieces fall apart when it comes to meaning and the narrative that is in them. And so um, I'm getting a little bit away from your question. Sorry about that. But I think I am very much drawn towards I want my pieces to tell a story. And so I do want to be tight with with the subject matter because I believe every work of art is an act of affection for an audience. Like there's so many things each of you could be doing tonight, and you're choosing to spend this time with me right now. That is a tremendous honor and a tremendous gift that you're giving me as an artist. And in reciprocation of that is I want to do my best work. I want to create something that's understandable, something that's meaningful. Um, so I think it's this dance between um, being photorealistic with your painting style. I don't want to go there because I feel like you might as well just take a picture, right? If it's too abstract, I think it's a waste of your audience's time because what are you even saying, you know? So where's that middle ground of telling an interesting story, of telling a good story, a story that's worth your time, a story that might even elevate culture, you know? That would be the greatest sense. Resilience. So amazing thing about bighorn sheep is in the fall during the rut, they will two males will fight up to like 24 hours, and this is like 30 mile an hour headbutts, so it's 60 mile an hour impact, right? Just tremendous amount of force coming against. And the meditation was, what how are we resilient in life? How badly do we want to continue working on something? Ironically, a painting, right? Yeah, you have to be careful what you name your paintings, because it does seem to like there's something happening there. There's a vibe that took a lot of strength to paint that elk. Took a lot of resilience to keep coming to the studio. Oh, those horns are not right. Um, yeah, but what in your life is worth fighting for? It's an honor to hold the brush and get to have something come through you onto a canvas, and then it takes on its own story. I see what you're saying. Like, wow,
Person.
that's
Really strong.
yeah, that's very cool. The way that we title our paintings is really significant, and we really pour ourselves into our work. And so, in light of that, how you title your paintings and how you're shaping as an artist, how do I see who I am and who I want to be? Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, anyways, and I really appreciate that. Artists, I really think artists have a unique place in culture. And Abby and Gundy, thank you so much for hosting artists, because this doesn't happen unless there's a space for all of us to come to. Um, Artists have a unique place in culture in that we can be a kind of um, alarm system. We can shine a light on something in culture that we're concerned about, that we're disturbed by. And I see an increasingly fragmented and isolated culture that we're inhabiting. And we each have certain virtues that we bring to our community. And I want to provoke you all into seeing what virtue resonates with you. And maybe that is a clarion call to continue doing more of that, to be more of that. And that strengthens our culture. And so if that happens, I think that I've done my job as an artist. And that means that we need to be brave and courageous and provocative, right? To say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. And that means that we need a close knit family. I think we need friends, a community surrounding us that's willing to tolerate that stress. Because I think um, my hope is that as a community, as a people, we're frustrated with that division. We're frustrated with the political world that seems bent on dividing us in certain ways and ignoring all of the things that we have in common. And so that's thanks, Robin. Um, that's my hope. Yeah. Well, thank you all. It's a tremendous honor for me to get to share this work with you. So please let me know if you have more questions.